Stephen interviews you, discussing topics that matter to you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, smash the like button, and feel free to share it with others so that they can see it too. And if you're new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can get updates on what I'm doing for this channel. Thank you all so much for your support. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Stephen Interviews You. This is episode number 32, and I am joined by a very special guest.
Hey, I'm Creg Stephenson, sports writer for AL.com. Cover a lot of college sports, mainly South Alabama, Troy, a little bit of SEC, and also some like assistant sports editor duties, I guess you'd call it. So that's me. Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Thanks for being on here, Creg, and let's get right to it. So basically, what started your journey into college sports and sports in general? What really got it going for you? If you could tell your backstory, so to speak.
Yeah, I think I'm like a lot of people in this business where I played growing up, played baseball, football, not much basketball, but played high school football, played, I guess youth baseball until I kind of aged out of that. And, you realize at a certain point, you're not going to be good enough to play it, either in college or beyond, and you kind of want to still be around the games. And I was always a pretty good writer, so that's why I kind of gravitated toward journalism, and always read the newspaper every day and as many sports magazines as I get my hands on. And eventually you start figuring out I can make a living doing this. Not a great living, but you can make a living doing it. And so now I think this year is year 31. So I graduated from college in 1996. I've worked at a lot of different news organizations around the Southeast, and I've been with AL.com in my present role since 2014. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah. So I read on AL.com, I read your profile, and it says that you are a two-time graduate of the University of Alabama. So obviously, in your time in the state of Alabama, you've seen all sorts of college sports, not just South Alabama and Troy, but also probably the big boys as well, Alabama and Auburn, those schools as well. So my question here is, how would you compare college sports in environments like Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and Auburn to that of smaller schools like South Alabama and Troy?
Yeah, it's completely different. There's passion in those smaller places. The smaller places, don't get me wrong, there's just not as many. Whereas there, and I think you may have this at some of the smaller schools too, but there are people, their entire lifestyle is dictated by their teams. I know we see that in pro sports too, and in college sports. And obviously, the thing in Alabama has always been that we don't have any major league pro sports teams. We got minor league baseball, we got the UFL, we got some hockey, some minor league basketball, that sort of thing. But it's Alabama and Auburn football, 24/7, 365. And what makes South Alabama a little different is they've only had a football team since 2009. So a lot of the older graduates, even people that are older than say 35, they didn't have a South Alabama football team to root for growing up, so they became an Alabama or Auburn fan, or even we're kind of on the coast here where it's a little bit, the I-10 corridor is kind of a one community in a lot of ways. So you have some Florida State people and LSU and all that sort of thing as well. So I would just say, again, Troy and South Alabama, especially Troy, since they've been playing football for 100 years, they have their hardcore fan base and people that grew up with it, but there's just not nearly as many of them. And obviously that leads to not as much attention being paid statewide.
Yeah. So sticking with South Alabama, the Jaguars and their athletics programs, not just football, but in general, since you've been covering them, how has South Alabama's athletic department been developing? Because I know you keep a close eye to it. How has it really developed over the years for South Alabama?
Yeah, for the longest time, and like I said, they've been a school since 1963. I think the athletic program started pretty quickly after that. For the longest time, they were a baseball school. Eddie Stanky, who obviously was a major league manager for a long time, became the coach here in the late 60s and really took them to a very high level. They've never been to the College World Series, but they've been within the one win of the College World Series many, many times. And he and then his successor, Steve Kittrell, had a lot of great success on into the 90s and 2000s. And then, during the late 70s, early 80s, they became pretty good at basketball, made the NCAA tournament several times, sent some guys to the NBA. Here lately, though, and I think this is true at all the group of 5, group of 6 level, is that, if you're getting those great players now, you're not keeping them anymore. So, they're transferring up or that sort of thing. But, they've won obviously conference titles and a lot of things. And baseball has had some major league players recently. Brendan Donovan of the Seattle Mariners, probably the most prominent one right now. And, football sent a few guys to the NFL. Jeremy Reeves, who's a Pro Bowl safety with Washington Commanders, probably the best one of that bunch. So, it's really kind of a state and regional brand, but occasionally they'll sneak up on somebody. They beat Oklahoma State in Stillwater in football a couple of years ago, that sort of thing. And, baseball, they knocked Florida out of their own regional, beat them 19 to nothing or 19-2, something like that a few years ago. So, it's one of those things that really outside of the greater Mobile area doesn't get a ton of attention.
Yeah. So follow-up question to that, since you also cover Troy, the Troy Trojans, basically
Right.
same question there. How has their athletics program, all their programs, been developing over the years, football and otherwise?
For the longest time, they were really just a football school. They started out in NAIA. They won a couple of national championships there. They moved up to Division II, won a national championship there. They moved up to Division I in 2001, I believe it is correct. And they've been kind of a steady G5 program through the years. Won a couple of conference titles. John Sumrall, who's now at the University of Florida, was the coach a couple of years ago. And they've got a Hall of Famer in the NFL, DeMarcus Ware, linebacker with the Dallas Cowboys and Denver Broncos. Went there. OCU Manure won a couple of Super Bowls. The New York Giants is from there. So they, but again, for the longest time, they were really just a football school. And then here in the last 10 years or so, they've gotten really good at baseball and basketball. The basketball team won back-to-back Sun Belt championships. Over the years ago in the early 90s, they were kind of famous for the style they played in basketball. There was one game where they scored, I think, 258 points in a game. They're just shooting 3-pointers like crazy, and so they were kind of known for that. But here in the last, I would say 5 years, have become a pretty solid mid-major program. The problem with that is, your coach leaves when that happens, and Scott Cross just took the Georgia Tech job, so they got to rebuild that all over again. But they're pretty solid, broad-based athletic program in the Sun Belt, I would say.
Yeah. So speaking of both those schools, Troy and South Alabama, and you've seen it with all their games. What is the game day culture like in both Mobile, Alabama, and Troy, Alabama?
Troy definitely has more of a stronger fan base. They'll fill up their stadium for the bigger games. They don't do it for every game, but they'll fill them up for the bigger games. And again, you just have that 100 years of culture, football culture, people whose parents, grandparents, and great grandparents even went there. South Alabama, it's kind of developing. They really have to schedule around Alabama and Auburn. If they very often will, if Alabama and Auburn are playing a night game, they'll try to play an early game, just to make people not have to choose, because if they're going to choose, they're probably going to stay home, and watch it on TV, watch Alabama and Auburn on TV. So, for Troy, for some of the other arch rival teams, Louisiana, maybe, they'll draw a decent crowd, but generally, they're doing about 15,000 probably per game. And, on a big game, they'll, 20, 25,000.
Yeah. So speaking of the Sun Belt, my next question would be, since both South Alabama and Troy are in the Sun Belt, how is it like playing in the Sun Belt as far as football goes for both those teams because you see all the other teams in the Sun Belt Conference
Mhm.
come to town, Troy or Mobile. And how is it like? Because I ask this in part because last year, Ohio University supposedly had talks with the Sun Belt, preliminary talks about possibly joining the Sun Belt Conference.
Yeah, that's interesting. We saw what Northern Illinois went to the Mountain West. Is that right? So I guess
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
yeah. So, the MAC has always been kind of a strongly identified, regional conference. The Sun Belt has expanded quite a bit. It's gotten tougher for sure. Marshall, James Madison, Old Dominion, and Southern Miss joined about 3 or 4 years ago. Then Appalachian State and Georgia Southern a couple of years before that. What they've tried to do is bring it rather than some of the conferences like the American have gone after TV markets. They went and got Rice out of Houston, or they got some of the UAB from Birmingham, and programs that maybe aren't that strong, but they could. Charlotte's another one, potentially could draw TV eyeballs. Where the Sun Belt, their philosophy has been, we want to go get schools with a strong football culture, generations of fans that are interested in playing rivalry games up against teams in the conference. And that's why Appalachian State and Georgia Southern is a decades old rivalry from the days they were in the FCS, or 1AA as it was called at that time, and brought that to the Sun Belt. And they've tried to keep it fairly tight regionally, even though now it goes up to like Virginia and West Virginia, all the way back around, Arkansas, Louisiana now, because Texas State left. And so they've tried to keep it to where, instead of having to fly all the way across the country to play a conference game like they do in some other leagues, where everything's drivable, especially for the fans. When Texas State left and they were looking for a replacement, there are some schools thrown out there like Western Kentucky and some others, and they decided to go with Louisiana Tech because it's a drivable game for most of the fans, and that's really important to them, to be able to keep it regional, to where you care about the teams you're playing against. You want to go to the game rather than just, hey, we're in this bigger league, and we're gonna play somebody two time zones away. And I think obviously we've seen how that, to me, has hurt college sports. I think it's not necessarily in the Big Ten, but in places like the Mountain West and Conference USA, for example.
Yeah. And I keep track of conference realignment related issues because we hear it all the time.
Sure.
And it really speaks volumes when you have a school like my school, for example, Ohio University, supposedly talking to Sun Belt officials about maybe joining the conference. And it's like, I'm not that surprised by it.
I think that would be a mistake, personally.
Yeah.
I mean, when you don't have Ohio playing Miami and Akron and Kent State and all the Michigan schools and all that, and I don't know. I mean, it just it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. If you had kind of a bridge, like I said, if Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee were in the conference and you kind of had that bridge where you're bordering each other, to me, I don't think you should be. You can make some exceptions, I guess, but I don't like the idea of playing in a conference where you don't border at least one of the other states involved in the conference. Somebody like Hawaii obviously can do nothing about that, or even like I don't know, UMass or Boston College, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you have these geographic outliers like West Virginia being in the Big 12, that sort of thing. I don't like it.
Yeah. So with the Sun Belt Conference for both South Alabama and Troy, just from what you've seen, what does the future look like, in your opinion, Craig? What does the future look like for the Sun Belt Conference? As you mentioned, Louisiana Tech is joining the Sun Belt.
So far, there's still some legal entanglements, but it looks like it's going to happen.
Where do you see the Sun Belt Conference basically going when it comes to expansion or whatever else they may be doing?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure they're going to expand right now. They took Louisiana Tech because Texas State left. I'm not sure there's really anybody that they would. I would like to see some realignment to a degree, because, for example, in the state of Alabama, you have 4 group of 5 schools: South Alabama, Troy, UAB, and Jacksonville State, and they're in 3 different conferences. It would be a lot better if they were on the same conference. I just don't know if that's going to happen. But yeah, I think they like the number they're at. I think they feel like it's stable. You could, if you start losing schools, then obviously you'd have to go out and replace them. But as far as, creating a larger conference, they're at 14 now. They're the only FBS conference that still uses divisions. And assuming Louisiana Tech gets in and makes it 7-7 again, that's what they're going to continue to do. That again, it keeps you playing your arch rivals more often when you're in division, so they like that. So, barring a cataclysmic event like the power conferences breaking away and forming their own super league, and you have to realign everything, I think the Sun Belt's probably going to be pretty stable the way it is right now, for the future.
Yeah. So going back to sports writing and sports reporting, you were the president of the Alabama Sports Writers Association.
Right.
So take me through it when it comes to the process of sports writing in general. From that position of president of the Alabama Sports Writers Association, what basically goes into writing an article or writing any piece of content?
Yeah, well, the ASWA, I guess at one time it was more of there probably was some advocacy going on there, whereas, if you were having issues with access or whatever, you could advocate for your members. I'm not sure as much of that goes on. It's really sort of a kind of almost like a fraternal organization now, where we just it's just getting to know other people in the business, and we have a convention every summer and that sort of thing. But just in general, writing, I mean, it's all electronic now, obviously. We don't have a print product per se. We have a digital edition, but, sit down and start writing. Basically is what you do. You have to get, obviously, if it's a game story or something or a feature, you got to get some interviews up front. But depending on a good week, I'll probably have 15, 20, 25 pieces a week. During football season, even more than that, I guess. During the off season, you have to be a little more creative, but so much of the day-to-day stuff is, I would say, I don't know, I'm trying to phrase this the right way, but so much of the day-to-day stuff is just kind of like keeping up with the news and getting it out to the public, I guess.
Yeah. I asked that question because I have plenty of experience writing articles myself, sports articles and other things. So I was just curious as to how processes like that actually get going. So
yeah. I mean, it's just, you just kind of start with an idea and you think about, is this worth doing, and how might I, shape it or frame it or that sort of thing. I mean, it's just kind of I guess that's kind of a general idea. I don't know. It's one of those where I guess you know it when you see it, sort of thing.
Yeah. So sticking to college football, what we've been seeing, because this does cover all of college sports in general, but sticking to college football, governance and rumors of possibly the SEC maybe pulling away from the NCAA, and how they structure things like the college football playoff. What are your thoughts about that, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think it might happen eventually. I don't think it's going to happen there's no imminent, I don't know if danger is the right word, or no imminent threat of that happening, because obviously they've got a contract with the college football playoff and all that sort of thing. And all that would have to be worked out. I really do think, though, the idea that, the SEC is going to break away and we're only going to play the SEC, and, that sounds great for Georgia or Auburn or Alabama or LSU, but You got some members that if that happens, they're going to be struggling to win 6 games a year. The one year they did that, which was the COVID year where they played 10 SEC games, and that was their entire regular season. You had teams that, Auburn went 6-4 and their coach got fired. If they had played, it's Gus Malzahn, if they had played a regular schedule, they probably win 9 because they have those 3 non-conference games, or 4 even. And I just I don't think there's an appetite for kind of the lower half of the SEC to we're gonna struggle to make a bowl game every year. The TV money obviously will make a lot of people whole in a sense, but you don't want, if your team now is winning 9 games a year and you do this new structure and you're winning 5 or 6, your fans are not going to be happy about that. And so I think that they're going to have to keep some sort of intra-conference play on some level, just because you would you would have to reconfigure your expectation of what success is, and I'm not sure winning 5 and 6 games is going to meet that standard for anybody.
Right. So going back to the smaller schools in Alabama, South Alabama, and Troy, if that were to happen, that the SEC and the Big Ten by extension, they both break away from the NCAA and do their own thing, what kind of impact would that have on smaller schools like South Alabama and Troy and every other school in the G6?
Well, it would be a massive money loss, obviously. When South Alabama played Auburn last year, they got $1.5 million for that. And that goes a long way toward their budget, not just the standard items, but now that you've got revenue sharing, obviously that goes into the pool to pay your players with. And if you're not getting that money, then that would hurt. And obviously that there would be less desire, I would think, for the TV games. So you probably would have a reduction in the amount of money you're bringing in there. So yeah, it would be a massive, massive loss, I think. It's kind of a dirty secret. It's like, look, we'll go and play at LSU and lose 56-24, but we made enough money to sustain our program for another year. And occasionally they'll win one of those games. Troy beat LSU about 10 years ago, and it was a massive deal, but it doesn't happen all that often. And I think now it's going to happen even less because those programs are losing all their good players through the transfer portal. Even if you go out and find somebody that's kind of a diamond in the rough and potentially could be an NFL player, he's going to be going after his freshman or sophomore year now. And so I do think that the G5, G6 is much, much weaker across the board than it was even 5 years ago. It's unfortunate. I mean, you still see an occasional upset, but the talent level is just nowhere near as even as it used to be.
Yeah. So with that in mind, this follow-up question would be, if there is a breakaway, if we have more subdivisions in college football, do you think the G6, all the G6 conferences should do something like form their own postseason kind of tournament where it in some way would kind of benefit all of them?
I think you would do that as a last resort. I don't think you do that preemptively. If the Big Ten, the SEC, Big 12, and ACC, I guess, would be the ones, if they break away and make their own thing and exclude the group of 5, group of 6, which, will lead to lawsuits, obviously. But if they do, then I think and only then, I think you create your own championship, because, those programs fought for a long time to get on equal footing, and, they have the same number of scholarships and all that sort of thing. And, even though there's a massive difference in revenue and funding, I do think they should continue to play for the same championship now. But again, if the bigger conference is split off, then yeah, I guess you could create your own championship, but not until then.
Yeah. And I'm I'm of this same opinion too. To be honest with you, I do believe that Group of Six conferences they should be able to participate in events like the college football playoff.
Yeah,
But again, if this scenario were to happen, then you would have to have some sort of backup plan where you do
for sure.
set up a postseason format just involving the Group of Six. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
just something you
Totally.
have to do. So uh, moving on to
Yeah.
another topic that does affect college sports, and more of a two-parter kind of question, but the transfer portal and NIL.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? What are like the pros and cons of both those things? What's been good about those things, and what's been not so good about those things?
Well, the transfer portal obviously um, is there's a benefit to it because you're able to make other schools aware that you're out there. Because before um, you basically had to do a lot of legwork on your own to maybe go find somewhere else to play if things weren't working out. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some players are late bloomers, and maybe they're not an SEC caliber player at 18, but they are at 20, or there's a numbers game, or whatever it is. They were injured in high school, or whatever the case may be. But and the transfer portal, when they first brought it in and they said you can transfer one time with no penalty, I thought that was fine. But the unlimited portal has just been really bad for college sports, I think. And again, it just there's no roster continuity. They did take away the spring portal, which helps a little bit. So now you don't have teams getting rated after spring practice, and you kind of know the roster that you have at the end of spring is going to be the one you have in the fall. But there has to be something contractual, I think, because everybody says, well, coaches can leave whenever they want. Yeah, but coaches have to pay a penalty. I mean, there's a contract that they have to break, and there's a clause in that contract that they have to break. Now, the problem with that is if you start making people sign contracts, then you're treating them as employees, and I don't think the NCAA wants to treat athletes as employees, even though they probably should. But the NIL is the same thing. I mean, again, I'm perfectly okay with a player at Ohio or South Alabama who gets a little bit of notoriety and he goes and does a commercial for a car place, or he can sign autographs after the game and get paid for it, or whatever. I'm fine with that, but it should not be used as a enticement for acquisition. You should not be able to say, hey, come here and we'll pay you this much, or transfer, we'll pay you this much, whatever it is. I don't think that should be. I think that needs to be regulated. They're blatantly breaking the rules when you pay somebody to transfer or to commit in the first place. That are totally against the rules. But every time it goes to court, it gets struck down, and the NCAA did such a bad job of it for so many years of just cracking down on every form of player compensation that now they're paying for that. And so I have a less of an issue with players getting paid than I do with the unlimited transfers. I think that's bad for the sport. You can still have players get paid, but there needs to be some sort of regulation on how often you can go and what mechanism you have to enact to be able to go.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that there needs to be some sort of guardrails in place when you have stuff like NIL and transfer portal.
Yeah,
It's too loose. It's too much like the Wild West, and it's
for
just
sure.
you need to have some sort of rules in place so that you don't have schools like, for example, this issue with between Clemson and Ole Miss that popped up
Right.
not too long ago about
Well,
this linebacker, and Dabo Swinney got on a press conference. It's just really when you have issues like that, you got to have something in place where you can't keep having that happen.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, he was sitting in, apparently had enrolled and was sitting in class and had already signed his rev share contract with Clemson, and they, his deadline was not passed there, and they were able to. Yeah, that sort of thing should be punishable for sure. And even when it's more above board than that, and I know you probably know this. One of your arch rival schools, Miami, has started dropping a ton of money into NIL, tens of millions of dollars. They actually, a linebacker from South Alabama transferred to Miami, and I think I heard he got $400,000, which that's insane for a Group of 5 player. But it is what it is. And if you have a billionaire who is a booster or an alum, then you have an advantage over everybody else.
Yeah. So to wrap up, we're going to have a fun question here, going back to both South Alabama and Troy, the football programs, this upcoming season, 2026. You've seen both their schedules, and you've been covering what they've been doing with spring practices. I know it's early, but what is the outlook like for both the Jaguars and the Trojans so far?
Yeah, the Sun Belt is really unpredictable because you have so much roster turnover. But I will say, having watched South Alabama, I think they're going to be able to score some points. They play Ohio in week 3. Bishop
early.
Davenport, the starting quarterback for South Alabama, his first career start came against Ohio 2 years ago. So that'll be interesting. And again, I think they're going to be pretty good offensively. Defense, man, though, I think they're going to struggle. They only had 2 starters back. They lost 6 defensive linemen to the transfer portal and 3 starting defensive backs. And I mentioned the starting linebacker. And so they're going to have to be a team that outscores people. This is really a key year for Major Applewhite. They dropped from 7-6 to 4-8 last year. And if they have another losing record, it could be trouble. But I think they're going to be very, very hard pressed to be bowl eligible. I mean, they're probably a 4 or 5 win team again, just based on what I've seen. Troy's a little different. They did take a major step forward last year. They jumped from 4-8 to 8-6, which they ended up making the conference championship game. They have some key guys back, but lost a lot. As I mentioned, the Sun Belt's a little better than it used to be, but Southern Miss was really good last year, and then their coach left and took most of his team with him. So I think Troy's probably a top 2 or 3 team in the Sun Belt West, so they're probably looking at another 7-8 win type season, I would think.
Yeah. So I look at the schedule for my Ohio Bobcats, and of course, I saw the South Alabama Jaguars on our schedule.
Yeah.
I remember the game that we played back in 2024. That was a great game. It turned out well for the Bobcats. So when I saw the Jaguars on our schedule again, I was like, yeah, this should be another fun game this year. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to this upcoming season for college football in general. And so, for those of you guys watching this right now, I'll provide a link in the description box below that will take you to Creg Stephenson's profile page on AL.com, where you can check out his articles. He writes great stuff. I've read some of his articles. He does a great job doing that. And so, Creg Stephenson, thank you so much for being on my show, for discussing topics that matter to you. And thank you guys for watching. Take care, guys.